back over some of what my colleagues have been saying. Look, there are two issues here. It's not just confidence in what I regard as a very important policing tool. Undercover police operations, is very important. But I think it's more than that now. It's about the confidence in the management and supervision of the Met. And events of 16 years ago to you having to carry the can. And so I look at it really about the past, now and the future. And some of the issues around that, all through our communities, and the people at the top taking decisions over you to, just watching these accusations coming out over a period of time, I think is very damaging. So I'm not, and I know you don't mean that, but, it happened in the past, it's not going to happen now, is not good enough. It's not good enough. And I think we need a different response, albeit I do not criticise the response that you've done to date. I think some of the actions you've done are right and appropriate, but I think we need to do more. And I want to go back to this issue, and it's almost like the culture that everyone's a suspect who's not an active police officer. You haven't got that warranted issues, this inappropriate tasking. And it clearly is inappropriate in the cases we know about now. It's the cases we don't know about. Now, okay, my activities during the 80s, I've been on demonstrations, I've been supportive of the police, I've been critical of the police.
Big extremist.
Well, who knows? It depends on which police officer's looking at my file. The question is people are now going to be asking appropriately, which, are there other issues? How do we come clean on that in a sensible way to draw a line of the past? Of course we need to get to the bottom of the people's names there now, but if it comes out later on, a whole host of other individuals, other groups, for inappropriate targeting, this is not good for policing of this country. It's not good for policing of London, but I think it's got wider ramifications. So in your audit that we're doing now, what steps are we taking to, I think it's a very difficult task, that Len Duvall is not appearing on some of your list inappropriately, or whoever, do you know what I mean, around those issues. So somehow, I don't know how it is, but how do you get whistleblowers to come forward? Do we encourage ex-police officers at that period of the time to come forward and say, is there something inappropriate that they were done or not done, of where maybe actually they should be held to account, or not held to account, but maybe there's a discussion about these issues to get to the bottom of those issues, to learn the lessons for the future that we don't do it. Now, you're telling me that the regime and the issues of checks and balances and sign-offs, Len Duvall doesn't get inappropriately targeted. At this moment in time, I can't believe that. I can't. I take what you say at face value, but in the back of my mind, because of what I've read and because of the experiences of others, I can't quite take that. You need to walk the extra step, and you in MOPAC need to be asking the extra questions. That's the question I think the Chair's saying, in a bit more intrusive. No, you're doing the bit in governance, but you need to be asking the questions about how do we get confidence back of the people that we serve.
I agree with that.
Because that's what you do, police officers. It's not the other way. Whether it's an era that you thought you didn't, you're policing everybody and we're all here to be policed and watched and all the rest of it. That's not the police service we want. Do you know what I mean? In that sense. And I think there's a bit of that we've got to think about on some of those issues. Now, I want to go back to some of the issues about the management experiences. So first off, I don't want you to lose off about the inquiries you're doing now. How quickly can you clear up these matters, not just to the individuals named, but if there's anyone else inappropriately targeted, it's better for you to bear the soul than others. How do we get to the bottom of that? How do we get former police officers or with the files existing to come and tell us about this period of time or not, about what's gone on? Because I think there will be a collective debate about that. Yes, it will have an impact, but it may clear the air that gets us through. Of course, you rightly said you can only do things that you can do, the police activity. On my urgency, and of course, independent inquiries are important, and I think they have their place. The trouble is they are long, and I do agree with you, they sometimes don't necessarily lead to clear outcomes, and there must be clear outcomes, and others who are in control of that process must do that. In your police activity, there is an urgency for it to be done quickly and effectively. Now, I know, some of those issues that quickly you might miss something and someone then points out that you're trying to cover up something or not, but I do think some initial first stage sharing of information with people about any investigations you have is important. If you have to put caveats on it, there may well be more that you're going to discover later on as it goes. I think that must be a plus point about anything that the police do in terms of putting that, and it's got to be now, without giving the game away to criminals, we've got to have an open debate about what has happened. What's happened and why it's not there, and get that discussion and not be frightened of that, and not say you can't have this debate because there's an independent inquiry, because that's not going to happen, because people will talk about it now, the press will talk about it now, and we need to have that discussion, and somehow we need to have it while there's an independent inquiry that goes on. We can't carry on like this. Now I want to go back to management and experience issues. We're going for a major change in the Met. In terms of your experienced managers gone, some of those experienced managers may not be doing what we wanted them to do. So that's quite interesting. So a new generation of managers and supervisors coming into practice. I don't believe 16 years ago people that were cutting corners and shortcutting, or the objective was more important than maybe the tactics of how we reached the objective, whatever their view of what the objective was, has changed in terms of human behaviour. Now, you're telling me in terms of that management, intrusive management, that's constantly asked now. But in that sense, is there really an honest debate inside the service about, well, actually, no, we do work within the law, we do work within some values, we do work within a framework, and, the honesty of a manager of having to stop an undercover operation that may be very important because it's gone wrong, and all the rest of it. Who's going to be brave enough to call that? Which goes back to about the prior alterations and checks and balances and about that supervision. Because that supervision seems to be that one-to-one relationship with the person carrying out the task on behalf of us to keep us safe in some ways from whatever the issue is. Where does that come in? How intrusive does that come from above them into those operational matters and about what's going on there? And I want some reassurance. I think people want some reassurance about not just what you're doing now, but what about the future in terms of these issues, and how are we going to avoid, really learn the lessons of the past. Because I just have a view, I'm feeling very uncomfortable at the moment. We're going to just see, in 7 years' time, you're gone, others have gone, and we will hear more of the same. We cannot have that. And I do think you have to look at models of external oversight around some of the issues, because I think that argument has been lost. Unless you can, unless there is this time now of dealing with the now and the future and how we deal with the past that gives people confidence to say, OK, we might have some systems. For some, that may never happen, but I do think time's running out.
It's quite a broad tapestry, but no, but I mean, I wasn't being critical. I was just saying it's difficult to respond point by point. But I'd like to respond just in 3 simple ways, if this is all right. I think one is I agree with Len's first point, which is easy if you get away from not so much the detail, but each individual allegation, the overall impact is profoundly damaging to the confidence of the public, particularly perhaps minorities in the police. Whether it happened 16, 20 years ago, 1968, the echo comes down the years, and people want to be sure it's not happening now, which is the second one of your points. So I agree. I think the second one of your points I agree with. We can get caught in a forensic, look for the facts and then who's to blame almost, and rather than and in the process of doing that, take a while because you have to be sure, but it's not a very open process. So I think how we might build openness and transparency into that seems to me we can take away. And try and work. So I haven't got a slick answer at the moment because there are tensions, but I'm quite happy to see what we might be doing. It may be something to work with the Deputy Mayor to see what, the sort of accountability, how we might build that in. I think the third point about the, is there ever inappropriate tasking, if you like? I think what's far better now, and you can never get 100% guarantee, but my confidence is that the tasking is good. What you can never guarantee is that there's not peripheral, collateral intrusion. I think, you can imagine somebody goes somewhere to look at one person and someone else walks in the room, these things are going to happen. So I think that's something that's a real challenge, no matter who runs these operations. The third point about the new generation of managers, I think in the point you made, you capture some of the dilemmas. Because we might be losing experience, but of course we might be losing a culture that didn't want to be challenged either. So I think new generations don't necessarily bring less challenge. I think they often can, not ironically, they can be more honest, be more open. And probably they've also suffered the slings and scorns of others having got it wrong and realise, it's not a good idea. So I think that can be a positive. And the only other thing, the only two things you brought out. So one was that, of course, we would encourage whistleblowers to come forward, but they will come forward, if they come forward, with trepidation. Because every time somebody says this is a no-blame society, somebody gets blamed. There will be a criminal investigation. There will be a misconduct inquiry. Somebody will say, you were the manager, why didn't you stop it? So if we're waiting for people to come forward and get ready to be prosecuted, and I think that's a dilemma. It's a dilemma all the time, but I suspect particularly in this. So I think we can encourage people. Their experience, I suspect, particularly in London, that doesn't always work out in the way that they intended. They want to be open, and somebody says, what did you do? So I think we have to have a dose of reality around that. And the only final thing, and this is not a profound layer of reassurance, but you remember I said that I met our UCs last week. Well, there weren't a lot of them. But I said, well, have you got anything to say to me? What aren't you happy about? And we did talk about this particular revelation, which we knew was coming up over the weekend. And one of the things they said, well, can you stop some of the commanders inquiring into lots of detail about what we do? And their reasoning was that in doing that, they feel compromise their operational security. If they know which street they're in, what they're doing. I was quite reassured by the fact that people were asking questions and did want to know in detail, not to stop them doing the job, but to enable them to do the job in a way that was legal, safe. And the final comments I left them with, which I feel strongly about, is they take a lot of risks on our behalf, but they have to act within the law. And it's not their job to fill the gaps in the law, even if they see something that's wrong that they can't immediately intervene in. So they've always got to stick. And the final thing I said to them, if you ever feel uncomfortable with something you're doing, it's probably not a good idea. And I can't help you if you get that decision wrong. So they have a difficult job with it. We're here to support them. But as things move forward, they have to take their own accountability. Senior people have got to help them with that. But intrusion is good. We've got a phrase at the moment that